thank you so much for joining. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you're comfortable to have your camera on, we'd love it. So we just feel more connected throughout the session. But we're going to keep ourselves on mute during the presentation to avoid background noise. So if you have questions as we go, drop them in the chat. We'll keep track of them. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. You can come off mute. We can chat and have a conversation. We are recording today's webinar, so you'll have access to the replay afterwards. And so those who couldn't make it live can watch later. And we'll be sending that out after this is done. So now I'm excited to introduce Wyatt. Wyatt Davies is the founder and CEO of Simpl Care Services. He has 3 years of experience working directly as a direct support professional and 3 years of experience operating an HCBS provider across both Utah and Wyoming. And over the last year, he's been qualifying and facilitating relative provider services, specifically here in Wyoming, which gives him a unique perspective on the process and how it can best support families. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Wyatt.
Thanks, Sarah. So like Sarah said, we're just going to talk about the ins and outs of relative providership, who can do it, what rules apply that regulate it at the Department of Health side. So we can get started. So first thing first, what is relative providership? According to the DD Waiver Service Index, page 3, which just kind of houses some of the definitions, they define a relative as a biological, adoptive, or a step parent. So when we're talking about relative providership, that's what we're talking about. There are also rules and regulations that govern legally authorized representative relationships to the waiver participant. So anyone who's authorized to make decisions on behalf of another person, typically you're going to be the legally authorized representative, and just know that whether or not you're the relative, meaning biological, adoptive, step parent, there are also maybe some rules that apply to you, will be rules that apply to you. So first thing first, what can't be done? We pulled this out of the Waiver Service Index again on page 3, where you can see that relatives, spouses, and legally authorized representatives are prohibited from providing participant-directed services. So that'll be anything through a fiscal agent. In Wyoming, typically we're talking about access. So if you've heard of or considered working with access, just know that there are some restrictions surrounding relatives, spouses, and legally authorized representatives. In fact, you're prohibited from providing services through those kinds of services. So now that we talked about what you can't do, let's talk about some of the other things that will help you to be eligible. So first of all, if you're a relative and you want to provide services for your loved one, you're going to have to form an LLC or a corporation, and then you're going to have to go through the process of becoming a certified provider. Or as an alternative, you can be an employee of an existing certified provider. So those are your 2 options: do it yourself or become an employee of a certified provider. And then in every situation, you're also going to be required to complete a relative disclosure and acknowledgement form. So now that we know how you can do it, what it takes, what services can you provide as a relative provider? So we're going to break that down. We made this handy dandy chart to try and make it a little more visually easy to understand. So we'll run through this. I'm going to go top to bottom, left to right. So when we're talking about a relative provider, you have a participant, a waiver participant, your loved one. The first thing we need to look at is their age. So if they are under the age of 18, then right off the bat, we can know that they may be eligible for personal care. As a relative provider, you may be eligible to provide personal care. Whether or not you are the legal guardian, there's other things we'll talk about, some rules that govern that, but just know if your loved one is under the age of 18, whether or not you're the legal guardian, you may be able to provide personal care. If your loved one is over the age of 18, then we need to ask some additional questions. So first of all, if you are the legal guardian and the participant is over the age of 18, then there are no services that you're going to be eligible to provide. We will show you the citation that we rely on in just a second that teaches us that rule. And then last, if your participant is over the age of 18 and you are not the legal guardian, then there are some services that you may be eligible to provide, depending on whether or not you share the same primary residence. If you do share the same primary residence with your loved one, who is a waiver participant over the age of 18, then you will be eligible to provide personal care. You may be eligible to provide personal care, adult day services, and community support services. If you have a different primary residence, meaning you don't share the same residence, then it is possible that you can also, on top of those 3 services, provide community living. So circling back on what I just mentioned right here, where we have participants over the age of 18 and you are the legal guardian, no services, I just want to show you where we get that From the DD Waiver Service Index, page 3, again, we can see that legally authorized representatives are prohibited from providing waiver services, with the exception of personal care services for an individual under the age of 18. So you can see coming back here, we can do personal care as the legal guardian if they're under 18, but if you're the legal guardian over 18, there's nothing that can be done according to the current rules. Rules for community living. So we're going to talk about diving in some additional things that can apply and again can help you understand those qualifications. We've already referenced these a little bit, but on the service index, page 21, we learn about community living, some of the relative provider rules, and we learn that a relative provider can provide all components of the service, but they must form an LLC or a corporation and be a certified provider or an employee of a certified provider. And then this last part's key. They must not reside in the same primary residence as the participant. We covered that. You saw how that worked out in our chart. Just to reemphasize, community living, you cannot do it as a relative provider if you share the same primary residence. Additional rules for personal care. For relative providers must not exceed 4 hours a day. So we can do personal care as a relative provider, but we are limited into the volume, how much we can do. We're limited to 4 hours a day. And then if the relative provider is younger than 18, then we also have to look at the participant's adaptive behavior quotient, make sure that it is at 0.35 or lower on the inventory for client and agency planning, otherwise known as the ICAP. This is found on DD Waiver Service Index, page 33. Pretty straightforward, but if you have any more questions about that, we can address those later. So just as a summary, we'll share this chart one more time. Participants under the age of 18, we can always do personal care as a relative provider. If we're over the age of 18 and we are the legal guardian, there's no services we can provide. If we are not the legal guardian, we just have to look at whether or not we share the same primary residence. If we do, then we are limited to personal care, adult day services, and community support. If we have a different primary residence, we can do personal care, adult day services, community support, and community living potential options. All right, that's the summary of that's the content we wanted to discuss. We're going to open it up to questions. So, Sarah, I don't know if you want to manage this.
Sure. Yeah. Feel free to come off mute and ask any questions you have, or if you want to just drop them in the chat, feel more comfortable doing that, feel free. And we do have a couple questions that came in like prior to this, so we can go through those as well if there's no questions right now.
Perfect. Yeah, let's just start with those.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that then. Awesome. So I'm just pulling those up right now. Okay, someone asked, how fast can I become a relative provider?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is that it depends. So let me come back to this slide here. So there's two ways that we can become a relative provider. We can form our own company, we've discussed this, or we can become an employee. Typically, the route of forming your own company and then also becoming a certified provider is going to take longer. It just depends on your resources, how much time you have to dedicate to that application process. But we've seen that can take anywhere from 3 months to even up to a year, just depending on at what pace you take things. If you want to go the route of becoming an employee of a certified provider, that is typically going to be quicker because the company's already a certified provider. You don't have to go through the process of establishing all those things. So, for example, when you work with us at Simpl Care, we've helped providers go through the process in a matter of anywhere from honestly a week to 3 weeks, just depending on the pace of things, because there are still things that have to be done, like getting CPR certified, doing some background screenings, but those are relatively small in comparison to the process of becoming a provider.
Perfect. Yeah, the next question we have is, let me pull it up. What are day-to-day responsibilities once I'm a relative provider?
Yeah, there are several different documentation responsibilities that relative providers, it's really the same as becoming a direct support professional and not being a relative provider. Anything that a caregiver would traditionally have to do, all the same rules apply to a relative provider. Just to give you an idea of what some of those are, we have to do EVV, which is the acronym for electronic visit verification, which is just Medicaid standard for capturing your clock in and clock out time, your geolocation for where you're clocking in. When you're working with Simpl Care, we've developed into our app a way to consolidate all of these reporting and scheduling processes into a pretty straightforward, easy process. But yeah, we do have to always make sure we're documenting things and doing things compliant with what Medicaid asks of us. So EVV is one of those. There's also just some other shift notes and just different reports that we have to always be able to generate to make sure that we're following all of Wyoming's rules. Hopefully that gives a little bit of an insight into the day-to-day. We're clocking in, clocking out, completing reports. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? If not, we'll go ahead and close up. Why, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we end?
I just think that relative providership is definitely a very cool opportunity for those who it works for. And it's not a great fit for everyone, but for those who are looking to be able to be more involved and access their Medicaid resources, and maybe where you can't, if you're struggling to find a provider, it can be really helpful to be able to get compensated for and provide the services yourself. Not great for everyone, but I think that it is really a blessing that it is an opportunity for people who need it. So yeah, we're excited. We're happy. At Simpl Care, we have facilitated these, as Sarah mentioned at the beginning of this call. We've facilitated relative provider services for a year now in Wyoming, and we've seen it be a blessing for a lot of people.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Wyatt. I think this was great. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll send over this recording and deck afterwards so you can review. But yeah, feel free to reach out, and then also schedule a call. Yeah, schedule a call with Jerem. He's our case manager relations guy, and he'd love to talk to you and get you set up.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much.